Okay, so this week we'll be working on making homemade pasta that you guys will be able to make using your hands and the rolling pin. Next week we'll work on using the pasta machine. Now, with pasta dough, there is tons, I mean hundreds of recipes with different flours, just egg yolks, whole eggs, no olive oil, some olive oil, salt, no salt. So, this is a recipe that I tested out that seems to be the best one to make handmade fettuccine, ravioli, tortellinis. And so today we're going to work on making this dough. So you're going to need 2 cups of 00 flour, which is bread flour. It's basically flour that is super thin. It's milled thinner than regular all-purpose flour. So 2 cups of that, a pinch of salt, a tablespoon of olive oil, 8 eggs. We're going to use 3 whole eggs and 5 egg yolks, and some extra flour, table flour, so that we can knead our dough and it doesn't stick to your surface. Now, for the eggs, you can do one of 2 things. When you crack the egg, you can do the going back and forth of the yolk and putting the egg whites in another bowl. Now, you have to be careful because when you do crack the eggs, you have sharp edges and it can, pinch the yolk. Or you can crack the egg right directly into your hand and just swing it back and forth, and all the egg whites will fall into the bowl, and then you can throw the egg yolk into the bowl with the rest of the eggs. Save your egg whites. You can make egg white omelets, or you can make meringues. There's a lot of uses for egg whites, so don't waste it. So we'll put that to the side. And so our first step will be, well, our second step, because now we have our 5 yolks and 3 whole eggs. We're going to add the olive oil, and we're going to add the pinch of salt. And we're just going to whisk. Make sure you poke all the egg yolks, whisk it, mix everything well, and then leave that to the side. So you're going to drop your flour again. Even if the recipe does not say it, and I keep saying this to you guys and will continue to say it, rule of thumb, sift your flour. So I sift the flour before we started the video, getting my mise en place ready. And it just helps to take out all the little hard little balls of flour. So you're going to make a really big well in the middle. Make room for your egg. And you just kind of throw in a little bit at a time and try to mix flour in little by little. This will help incorporate everything together. Add more egg and continue to incorporate the flour. You want to do this with the fork before you use your hands so that your hands don't get too sticky. You just want to keep incorporating the flour, mixing everything, bringing everything together. You might have a little escape, but it's okay, just keep mixing it. Incorporate all the flour. And you do this until you bring all your flour and egg mixture all together. Okay, so when you get it to this point, this is when you can start using your hands. And so you're gonna keep folding it into itself until you can get it all combined into a ball. So you just kind of keep folding it to itself. Make sure you grab all the little pieces and just continue to fold it into itself. And so you're just going to keep going. I know it doesn't look like it's going to be a smooth dough, but it will, I promise. It's just going to take a lot of time. A lot of kneading, a lot of elbow grease. Now, there's a couple of things about making pasta and breads in general and baking. Your dough will either be dry or moist, and the reasons for that is that sometimes there's extra moisture or less moisture in the air, and so that will affect your dough. So what you will do if your dough is too sticky, you sprinkle a little bit of flour at a time. At this point, you should the dough should not be sticking to your hand. It should be coming off and kind of just bundling itself into itself. So if your dough is too dry, I just grab an egg and add a little bit of water and add some of that mixture, half a teaspoon at a time, depending how dry my dough is. So you're gonna keep doing this process, this kneading, turning it, bringing it and folding it to itself, and then pushing it out. When you do that, it naturally brings up the other edge, and you do the same process. So you're gonna be doing that over and over for about 12 minutes. Yes, I said it, 12 minutes. So I'll see you when this is done. Okay, so I ended up kneading for a little bit over 12 minutes because I have tendonitis. So you're going to go anywhere between 10 to 12, maybe even 15 minutes. You shouldn't need any more than that. What you're trying to look is a really smooth texture where you actually put your finger in, push in, and it bounces back up. So you'll see my fingerprint go in, and you'll see it bounce back out. That's how you know your dough is ready. Now, some of your dough will be, like my dough is a little on the pale side, but if your egg yolks are a little darker hue of orange or yellow, you'll have a more tinted dough. So it just depends on the eggs. So now we have our dough. It's nice and fluffy and smooth, and it bounces back. So now we have to let it rest. And this is a really important part of the process. When you knead flour, dough, wheat flour, all-purpose flour, bread flour, what happens is you're activating the gluten inside of this flour. So that means it gets really, really tight. So if I were to try to roll this out and start making pasta, there's no way. It just will not shift. It will come together. It will still tight. So this process is allowing it to rest so that all the gluten can relax. So then we can roll it out. I'm gonna wrap this nice and tight, and you're gonna let this rest for an hour. And meanwhile you're doing that, you'll be following your recipe to make a piccata sauce, so that when you're done with your pasta, you can toss it in a beautiful piccata sauce. Okay, so now that your dough's rested for an hour, you gotta make sure we have some table flour, which is just all-purpose flour, a rolling pin, somewhere you're gonna put your pasta when you're done rolling it out and cutting it. I like to use a bench scraper as well as a knife. So after the dough's rested for an hour, you see it's really nice and soft and bouncy. We're gonna cut it into 8 pieces, equal pieces. So half, half, those halves and halves. Doing this will allow you to able to manage the dough easier when you're rolling it out by hand versus these big pieces. Next week we'll work on using the pasta machine, and you'll also cut it this size. It just makes it manageable, easier to deal with. So once you've cut all your pieces, we will take one of those pieces. Make sure you wrap the rest of the dough up. If not, it will dry out, and you do not want that to happen. So we're going to set this to the side. And so when we're putting the pasta away, we could either put it on a plate dusted with a lot of flour, or I'm going to use some of this later on today. So I'm just putting them in plastic bags and tossing them in the fridge like that. Make sure that your workspace is nice and covered in enough flour, because you don't want your dough to stick. And constantly making sure that your rolling pin has enough flour on it as well. So the first step, what I like to do is to shape it into the shape that I'm actually going to roll it in. And because we're working on fettuccine today, we want a nice rectangle piece so we can cut, a nice amount of noodles from each piece. So we're just going to start from the middle and just roll out. And we're looking to do, roll it out as a rectangle, and always from the middle out. So you're going to roll that out, and then you're going to fold it into 3s. What we're trying to accomplish is trying to get this dough into a nice even shape, and so doing this will help. And so we'll do this one more time. See how it's starting to stick? Just constantly making sure that your dough has enough flour. So we're going to fold it again into 3. Flip that over. And now we're going to go ahead and follow through. Just a little bit of pepper. And start rolling it out. So this process should take about anywhere between 2 to 3.5 minutes. We want to extend this out into a nice rectangle piece. We know that it's done when you can see your hand through the pasta, and you want to make sure that it's even. Always rolling from the middle out. You can turn it around, flip it, so that you can get nice even, a nice even dough. Okay, it looks pretty good. So you want to be able to see your hand through the pasta, like you can see it here. You can see my finger, you can see my skin. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to set the rolling pin to the side. I'm going to use my knife for this part. And you want to basically even it out so you have as even as possible when you start cutting your pasta. So I'm going to go ahead and cut right here. Well, that wasn't a very good cut. And then I'm going to turn it around here, do the same thing, maybe about here. So now that we have an even sheet, making sure again that it's nice and enough flour so that it doesn't stick to itself, we're going to go ahead and ribbon it onto itself, fold it, ribbon it, And this is where we start cutting our noodles. You could cut this in half and you would have enough to make, you would have the thickness for lasagna noodles. Or we could do linguine noodles, which is like 1/8 of an inch. But what I want you guys to practice is fettuccine noodles, and that's about 1/4 of an inch, so about that much. And so do this process slow. If you can really grasp the technique at a very slow pace, then as you practice it, you will be able to move quickly. You will not be able to get to perfection if you try to go fast. You have to get the skill down at a slow pace. And so please take a minute, even if you feel like you want to measure everything, which you don't have to. This is just to eyeball it. So, about here. And you just cut all the way through. And move slow. It's okay. There's no rush. Make sure you cut all the way through. And just looking. And so as you cut, when you're finished cutting, you can start separating the noodles, and you see you have your nice noodle. You can even stretch them out a little bit, not too much, because then they'll tear. So you undo it like messy hair. And when you're done cutting all of it, you'll spread them out and you'll dust them really good with flour, because you can't cook these right away because you've worked the gluten up into this dough. So what you need to do is you need to let them rest for at least 10 to 15 minutes before you cook them. They'll only take about a minute or two in hot water, and that'll be done. But if I put these noodles in right now in hot water and cook them, they're gonna get really chewy, and we want a nice al dente texture, but we do not want a chewy texture. Today I'm gonna actually make some ramen noodles, so I'm gonna cut these as thin as I possibly can. So if you have enough pasta to make your dish with the piccata sauce, go ahead and play around with the different thickness. You have about 8 pieces altogether that create each piece from your dough creates about this much pasta. So you technically have enough to try different widths of pasta. So I'm gonna make these into chow mein noodles because there's a lot of egg, and chow mein noodles are basically egg noodles. So I'm gonna cut them as thin as I can and make them with some sauteed broccoli later. So feel free to play around with different thickness, but please make sure you make enough fettuccine noodles so that you can make with your piccata sauce. So after you're done cutting your pasta, make sure that it is nice and floured. If you're gonna make it a little bit later, you can put it in a Ziploc bag with enough flour. As you see, it's really, has a lot of flour there so that it doesn't stick to itself. But if you're gonna make it right away, just leave it on the plate or on your sheet, whatever you're using to put it to rest, with enough flour. Let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then you can cook it. You could also start your piccata sauce or any other sauce that you're making while your pasta's resting. So that is a very basic way of making hand rolled pasta with this dough. Next week we will have the pasta rolling machines, and we're gonna work on making raviolis and tortellinis and spaghetti using the different attachments. So yes, please enjoy. Again, this is the first time you're doing it. Don't be hard on yourselves. If you look over here, these are all my little mistakes, and that's okay. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. There's people that I know that can do this with their eyes closed. I don't make pasta every day, so they don't look as perfect as they could look if I practice a little bit more. Yeah, and there you go. So enjoy, have fun, and we'll talk later.